I'm going to read Eli Clare's definition or discussion of impairment and disability. I think it's like a really helpful way to start conceptualizing what I mean by disability. Whole paragraphs never cascade from my fingertips. My longhand is a slow scrawl. I have trouble picking up small objects, putting them down. Dicing onions with a sharp knife puts my hands at risk. A food processor is not a yuppie kitchen luxury in my house, but an adaptive device. My gross motor skills are better, but not great. I can walk mile after mile, run and jump and skip and hop, but don't expect me to walk on a balance beam. A tightrope would be murder. Boulder hopping and rock jumping, not much better. I'm not asking for pity. I'm telling you about impairment. Oliver defines disability as the disadvantage or restriction of activity caused by a contemporary social organization which takes little or no account of people who have physical or cognitive or intellectual impairments. Let's try it again. The disadvantage or restriction of activity caused by a contemporary social organization, which takes little or no account of people who have physical and or cognitive and or intellectual impairments, and thus excludes them from mainstream society. I write slowly enough that cashiers get impatient as I sign my name to checks. Stop talking to me. Turn to my companions. Hand them my receipts. I have failed timed tests, important tests, because teachers wouldn't allow me extra time to finish the sheer physical act of writing, wouldn't allow me to use a typewriter. I have been turned away from jobs because my potential employer believed my slow, slurred speech meant I was stupid. Everywhere I go, people stare at me, in restaurants as I eat, in grocery stores as I fish coins out of my pocket to pay the cashier, in parks as I play with my dog. I am not asking for pity. I am telling you about disability. Alright, so I'm going to explain sort of the difference between a medical model of disability and a social model of disability, and I want to do this to kind of talk about how colleges look at accommodating students with disabilities and where that framework comes from. So a medical model of disability says that disability is intrinsic to the individual and may reduce quality of life or cause clear disadvantages. That is, the disability lies within their body. A medical model of disability revolves around identifying the illness or disability, understanding it, and then learning to control or alter its course. The medical profession is central to a medical model of disability. Great. And then a social model of disability, which is a little bit more what Eli Clare was talking about previously, and sort of what I buy into, says that. Systemic barriers, negative attitudes, and exclusion are the ultimate factors in defining who is disabled. This model recognizes that some people do have physical, sensory, intellectual, or psychological variations, which can cause functional limitations. But these limitations are not the cause of individuals being excluded. So, there we go. So, I've talked about medical and social models of disability, and now I sort of want to read you all information from the Disability Student Services Office at Oberlin College. It looks similar to a lot of other colleges' disability services that I've looked at, and I think it's interesting because I think that they're sort of following the social model by admitting that if you give students accommodations, then students with disabilities accommodations, then they can succeed and can be part of a learning environment, right? But the way that they get those accommodations is still through a medical model. So I'm going to read you guys a little bit about it. So it says, students must supply written documentation of a disabling condition as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and its revision of 1974. Under those laws, a person has a disability if he or she has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of the major life activities: walking, standing, seeing, speaking, hearing, breathing, learning, working, or taking care of oneself. Has a record of such impairment or is regarded as having such an impairment. And then this is how they say that you should register as a student with a disability. The student contacts the director or associate director of the Office of Disability Services to register as a student with a disability. The student must then provide written documentation of disability following the guidelines established. For more information on appropriate documentation, see documentation, which I'll read to you. And then it says, 3. The student meets to discuss documentation, the determination of disability status, and appropriate accommodations. All accommodations are determined on a case-by-case basis. The presentation of documentation does not automatically guarantee disability status or specific accommodations. All 3 steps are required. Okay, so this is how the doctor gives the school. So you go to your doctor and they give you this documentation and then you give it to the school. So this is what they say the doctor needs to do. You need to talk about the history. A complete history of prior psychiatric diagnosis and treatment. This is if I just picked one, but this is for psychiatric accommodations, right? The history should include copies of psychiatric records or summaries from the treating professional and information regarding any prior academic accommodations. Testing. Appropriate psychological or neurophysical testing which supports the diagnosis and indicates the specific symptoms that have occurred as a result of this disability. And diagnosis. A complete current DSM-IV diagnosis and clear statement of disability. Impact of the disorder. A comprehensive description of the impact of the disability on learning and living with and without medication, including evidence of current impairment. And then a treatment plan. This is the part that I find most interesting. So they say a current treatment plan that addresses recommended interventions to alleviate or control the disability, including the impact of medication on the student's ability to meet college demands. So I think what's really interesting there, and this is for psychological disabilities, but this carries over for learning disabilities and mental stuff and physical. It says to a treatment plan that addresses recommended interventions to alleviate or control the disability. So the idea is that you need to stop having that disability and the school is happy to help you, right? All right, next I have the list of student demands from the during the Third World Liberation Front. These are from San Francisco State University, but I think they're really interesting because they point out where students of color felt like they were being discriminated against in the university, and I think it really connects to the way that I'm trying to define accessibility to the classroom, right? So this is what they say. 1. That a school of ethnic studies for the ethnic groups involved in the Third World be set up with the students in each particular ethnic organization having the authority and control of the hiring and retention of any faculty member, director, and administrator, as well as the curriculum in a specific area of study. That 50 faculty positions be appropriated to the School of Ethnic Studies. 20 would be for the Black Studies program. That in the spring semester, the college fulfill its commitment to the non-white students by admitting those that apply. That in the fall of 1969, all applications of non-white students be accepted. That George Murray and any other faculty person chosen by non-white people as their teacher be retained in their position. And George Murray was an English professor who was fired because he was involved in the Black Panther Party. So these demands are clearly really radical. The idea that all applications of non-white students be accepted, that the students have control over the curriculum, and that they have control over who's teaching them. It's really radical demands that I think really speak a lot about accessibility and about sort of the problems that are going to come up in the academy. The demands that did go through for the San Francisco State students, they did get an ethnic studies program.